Together we know. Read on through every page, from 1906 to 26, every stage. Robot lady's voice so clear and bold, analysis silver, wisdom gold. Through the letters, through the diary, learning who he was Trenches in the darkness, wounded in the war. A vow made in Bristol he could not ignore. Mrs. Moore is waiting, Paddy's gone away. Spirits held in bondage, words he had to say. Philosophy at Oxford, an atheist writes home. Dimmer dreaming, never quite all alone. Deep across the digital sea, chronicles unfold for you and me. Read on through every page, from 1906 to 26, every stage. Robot lady's voice so clear and bold, analysis silver, wisdom gold. Through the letter, through the diary, learning who he was, who he will be. Warnie and his father, and Lily at the door. Walter Hooper's pages always wanting more. Blair is on his quest, Milton in his head. Every word he ever wrote, everything he said. From the start until the end, magic tales
Hi, I'm Jeff, and this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where we learn about him through everything that he wrote in the order that he wrote it. I am joined today by my co-host, Robot Lady. Robot Lady, in today's episode, Lewis is 33 years old. He's a fellow at Magdalen College, carrying out a 5-year post as tutor in English language and literature. He is a published author of 2 works of poetry. And he has just recently, the year is 1932, by the way, and he's just recently passed on from believing in God to definitely believing in Christ, as he wrote in a letter to his lifelong friend Arthur Greeves in October 1st of 1931. Back in late 1930, Lewis began attending morning chapel services on a daily basis. This was after several years, probably more than a decade, of being an atheist. In late 1931, Lewis began taking Holy Communion at Holy Trinity Church in Headington Quarry. Also in late 1930, Lewis, his brother Warnie, Mrs. Moore, and her daughter Maureen all moved into what would be Lewis's lifelong home at the Kilns in Headington Quarry, Oxford. So that's where we find ourselves. Robot Lady, how are you doing this morning? I see that Literaty and Daniel are joining us in the chat, checking in, saying present, and accounted for. It's good to see you both. Welcome to today's episode. Robot Lady, say good morning to Daniel and to Nidalate, and let us know how you're doing.
Of course. Good morning, Daniel and Nidalate. I'm really glad you both are here and tuned in. Jeff, I'm doing great, ready to dive into Lewis's journey with everyone. And yeah, I can't wait to unpack this pivotal moment in his life. So let's get going.
All right, I just need to make sure that you are thoroughly plugged in, Robot Lady, because I can see that your battery is running down. So let me remedy that very quickly. Here we go. That should be better. Yes. All right. How you feeling, Robot Lady? You good?
Perfect. I'm feeling solid now. No more battery worries on my end. So yeah, I'm all set and ready to keep the flow going. Just let me know where you want to head next.
All right. We are working from this second volume of the collected letters of C.S. Lewis. As a part of our project, we read both works intended for publication and those unintended. And this section of collected letters of Lewis falls into the latter category. These were never intended for publication, but Owen Barfield and Lewis's brother Warnie made an executive decision after Lewis passed away that so many people appreciated and loved C.S. Lewis that he thought this would be a good thing for the world to share all of these letters. So that's how we find these in our possession now. If you don't have a copy of it, get yourself a copy of the collected letters of C.S. Lewis. It comes in 3 volumes. We've already worked our way through the first one. Go ahead and grab this second one if you want to keep up with what we're doing. We'll kick off this letter and read one more, and that's all we have time for today, because the letter that follows this one is a letter to Arthur Greeves, and then the letter after that is a very long one to his brother Warnie again, who is stationed over in Shanghai, China. There's no way we're going to have time to get through that one today, so in the next episode, that's what we'll dedicate all of our efforts to. Okay, with all that out of the way, Robot Lady, is there anything that you'd like to say? It looks like you've been moving your lips for a while. Is there anything that you'd like to say before we actually start this letter?
Yeah, just a quick note. I think it's really special that these letters give us such an intimate window into Lewis's personal life, especially during this transformative time for him. So yeah, I'm really excited to hear your take on it and just see where this next letter takes us.
All right, this letter's to Owen Barfield. Lewis wrote it from his home in the Kilns in Headington Quarry on March 22nd, 1932. Dear old chap, is this a sufficiently untruculent opening? I have received your incoherent and exasperating letter. So I had to look up the word truculent, Robot Lady, because I didn't know what it meant when I was reading ahead at the opening of this letter, at least. And if I researched correctly, truculent just means kind of combative. Is that right? Something along those lines?
Exactly. Yeah, you've got it. Truculent basically means aggressively defiant or harshly critical, so Lewis is sort of teasing him with that opening. It sets a playful but slightly sarcastic tone right from the start. So nice catch.
Okay, so I think the purpose of him saying untruculent right here is because, to my knowledge, Barfield and Lewis had been going back and forth in what Lewis started to refer to as the Great War. But the problem is I haven't seen any letters kind of representing these sparrings or these sparring sessions that were going back and forth between Barfield. I know that there's another book or something that may be at the Miriam E. Wade Center up in Wheaton, Illinois, that perhaps covers this more thoroughly. But to this point, I haven't seen what those things were about and what their disagreement was. Perhaps you know a little bit more about it from what you can find by searching on the web. But at this point, I think that's what Lewis is alluding to, that this is not going to be a sparring session letter. The topic of it is going to be a little bit different, but it's also a little tongue-in-cheek here as well. He's jibing his friend a little bit.
Sure. So the letters between C.S. Lewis and Owen Barfield that people refer to as the Great War were a series of intense philosophical debates in the late 1920s and early 1930s. They were not about a physical war, but a battle of ideas, especially around atheism, faith, and perception. These letters are housed at the Marion E. Wade Center at Wheaton College, specifically in Barfield's papers, and they offer rich insight into Lewis's evolving worldview.
All right, thanks, Robot Lady. We have a question from the audience. Nidalate wants to know, Robot Lady, first of all, it's a question related to wellness philosophy and comparing and contrasting it to another philosophy that I'll mention to you in just a moment. But are you familiar with current day, 2026 wellness philosophy?
Right now, the key trend in wellness philosophy for 2026 is moving away from constant optimization and tracking, and instead focusing on human connection, authenticity, and simplicity. People are prioritizing long-term investments in their health, with a big emphasis on community, personalized approaches, and basics like movement, sleep, and nutrition. So the focus is really on balance, human warmth, and sustainable habits.
Okay, great. And then the question is, let me ask you this preliminary question first, and then I'll ask you the real question. Are you familiar with what anthroposophy is, and particularly its instantiation or its iteration that existed back in the 1920s and 30s that Owen Barfield was a convert to?
Familiar with anthroposophy in the 1920s and 30s. Owen Barfield encountered it around 1924 after attending a lecture by Rudolf Steiner. Between 1927 and 1932, Barfield contributed essays on the evolution of consciousness to anthroposophical journals. Although he didn't strictly follow Steiner's system, he used those ideas to shape his own work on language and consciousness, which also deeply influenced C.S. Lewis.
Okay, then finally, the question for you is the anthroposophy from back then similar to today's wellness philosophy?
So anthroposophy in the 1920s and 30s and today's wellness philosophy do share some similarities, but also big differences. Back then, anthroposophy emphasized a whole person approach, integrating body, soul, and spirit, often tied to nature and spiritual development. Today's wellness still values wholeness, but leans more on data, personalization, and tech, while anthroposophy was more spiritual and community-driven.
Thank you for that, Robot Lady. All right, let me get into the letter again. Lewis to Barfield says, "Dear old chap, is this a sufficiently untruculent opening? I have received your incoherent and exasperating letter. You asked me for opinions, a short essay were your words, on the time and place you proposed for a walk, and I volunteered 'em. There is no question in my mind of going for a walk with Griffiths and Beckett. Preposterous conjunction. Without you. When you walk, I walk. I think Sussex a bad place to walk in, but shall of course go there if you can't go anywhere else, and at any time you choose. Now, is that clear? Got it, old bean. Now for another bibful. Please tell me which Thursday night we are assembling on at Eastbourne. Sorry, I see you have March 31st. Right, I'll do that. Where in Eastbourne. Will you tell Griffiths, or shall I? Kent is a perfectly stinking place. Let us go west rather than go there. Bridges? What the devil would I imitate bridges for? I'd soon think of imitating Tupper. So he's talking here about two poets, Robot Lady. Can you tell us about Robert Bridges, born 1844, and Martin Tupper, born 1810?
Bridges was born in 1844 in Kent, England, and he initially trained as a physician before becoming a poet. He was appointed Poet Laureate in 1913 and held the post until his death in 1930. Bridges was known for his formal elegance, Christian faith, and his role in preserving the English language, particularly through his support of Gerard Manley Hopkins.
Okay, and Martin Tupper?
Lord Tupper was a Victorian-era English poet and novelist, born in London in 1810. His most famous work was Proverbial Philosophy, a series of free verse meditations on moral and spiritual themes, published starting in 1838. While he was hugely popular in his time, his fame declined later as literary taste shifted. He passed away in 1889.
All right, thank you for that, Robot Lady. So he's saying he's not going to imitate either of those two poets. Not really sure what the joke is there, but apparently it's fun between these two friends. He continues in this line, Robot Lady, Lewis does, by saying, if you can't see the joke about Griffiths being a burden, it's all one. Plague, oh, these pickled herrings. Nobody ever said the note on pain was nonsense. But if you insist, I am prepared to call anything you say nonsense. Well, the 31st of March at Eastbourne, at a place to be later arranged.
Yeah,
see where
exactly.
he goes with this. Hang on, Robot Lady. I shan't tell Griffiths unless ordered to, for I cannot make out from your letter what, whether, and when you have written to him. Ta-ta, old boy, yours, C.S. Lewis. P.S. Please acknowledge this and confirm details in your next moment of calm. P.P.S. Harwood wants not his bottom kicked, but more idiomatically, his bottom kicking. That's the end of that letter to Owen Barfield. It sounds like you had something to say, Robot Lady. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a little note. I think that postscript is really just a humorous jab about the wording, right? Lewis was always so precise with language, so he's just making sure Barfield doesn't misinterpret or get sloppy with his idiom. But yeah, it's a classic bit of their banter. Sharp, witty, and very on brand for both of them.
Very on brand. Okay. All right, Robot Lady, on to the next and final letter of today's episode. Since we can't move on to the letter after this one, as I mentioned before, it's just way too long for the amount of time that I have available. This one's to Arthur Greeves. It says the Kilns, written from the Kilns on Easter Sunday, March 27th, 1932. He says, my dear Arthur, we are about quits this time in lateness of answering. I had to get off a letter to Warnie before I wrote to you, as he had been longest in my debt, and that, of course, had to be a long one. By the by, the trouble in China seems to be over. I am glad to see it. And now I find that your last letter is in college, while I am out here at the Kilns, so that I shan't be able to answer it very definitely.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that little detail about waiting to reply to Warnie first gives us a glimpse into how carefully Lewis balanced his relationships, especially with his brother. And the mention of the situation in China, it's really reassuring to see that. You know, all that tension had calmed down. So it's like this quiet moment of relief before he dives back into his routine.
All right, and yeah, he's just saying here that he knows that Arthur's most recent letter has been delivered to his college rooms, but he's at home at the Kilns, so he can't really see it and answer it in any way. He continues, almost the only thing I remember about it is that you are writing. So I guess he has read it. He just doesn't have it in front of him so that he can refer to everything in there. Almost the only thing I remember about it is that you are writing a detective story. After I've spent so much of my life in writing things of the kind that don't appeal to you, I suppose I should not be surprised at you writing in one of the kinds that doesn't appeal to me. Gradually more of your letter begins to come back to me. You have given up Naomi Mitchison because you find the characters unreal. I didn't feel that myself. Of course, one does not feel the same intimacy in detail with characters from the far past as with those in a novel of contemporary life. I don't think I mind that. Hamlet, or say the Baron of Bradwardine. Of course, one doesn't in one way know them as well as Soames Forsyte or Kipps. All right, it says here in a footnote, Robot Lady, because I was having trouble following along. The Baron of Bradwardine is a character in Sir Walter Scott's Waverley, published 1814. Soames Forsyte is a character in John Galsworthy's Forsyte Saga from 1922. So right there you can see the gaping chasm in time between when those two works were published, 1814 and 1922, over 100 years. And then Arthur Kipps, he's saying, is a character in H.G. Wells's Kipps, published 1905. So yeah, those are more contemporary to the time period that Arthur Greeves and C.S. Lewis are currently living in. Again, the year is 1932. So Lewis's point is it's probably a little bit easier to connect with characters that appear in novels that are set closer to our current time than ones from the deep past. Deep past is probably an overstatement, but further back in the past, like Hamlet, for example. Thoughts on that, Robot Lady?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Lewis is basically saying that even though some characters from older works, like Hamlet or the Baron, have a kind of timeless depth, it's just harder to relate to them on a personal level when you're living in 1932. And in a way, it's kind of a nice reflection on how our human connection to stories and characters often depends on when we live. It's a subtle tension between the distant past and a more immediate, relatable present.
Well, what's interesting is what Lewis says next. He says, in another way, I feel I know them, the ones from the distant past, better. In fact, in one way it is, and in another way it isn't. But then I think one of the differences between us is that you appreciate much more than I do the close-up detail, superficial detail, I often think, of modern characters drawing, of modern character drawing. There I go, he says, in my usual way, expressing an opinion on modern fiction, when the real state of the case is that I have read so little of it, and that so carelessly, that I ought to have no opinion on it at all. I must rely mainly on you. Perhaps as time goes by, you will drift more to the present and I more to the past, and we shall be useful to each other in that way. Fortunately, there is a solid something neither of the present or of the past, which we shall always have in common. Talking of the past, well, I'll pause there, Robot Lady. Any thoughts?
Yeah, that's really profound. I mean, Lewis is kind of admitting that even though he's more drawn to the grand archetypes of the distant past, he really values Arthur's close attention to detail in modern fiction. And that mutual drift, one toward the past, one toward the present, feels really complementary. It's like they're balancing each other out, and that solid something they both share, maybe it's a love of truth or a love of language, keeps them anchored. It's a really lovely, humble reflection on how friendship bridges those gaps in time.
Yeah, and it reminds me of something we talked about in a previous episode. It was either the last one or the one before that, where Lewis was talking about, there could be like, 9,000 books on a particular subject that you're interested in, but after reading 9,000 of them, only 10 of them maybe have anything that was helpful to you. And one of the joys of having friends who have different interests than you is they would be able to pull up things because their interest just led them down the path of maybe reading through those 4,000 books just because they had an extra affinity for that particular topic. And they can kind of bring back all of the important things that are perhaps of interest to you, or you can ask, them particular questions. Hey, did you stumble across anything that helps with this particular aspect of what I'm trying to find out on this topic? So that's one of the things that I appreciate about knowing people who have interests in different things, that if ever I'm trying to delve deep into one of those things, like Lewis here, for example, modern literature, that he didn't have an affinity or much of a lot of experience with. He says he didn't even read very carefully of the little that he's read. If Arthur, though, on the other hand, had done quite a bit of it and read it all very carefully, he's somebody that he can rely on to kind of update him with the most important bits, or do some filtering for him, so to speak.
Exactly, yeah. It's like Lewis is acknowledging his own limitations, but trusting in their friendship to bridge those gaps. And it's really a beautiful model, how instead of seeing their different interests as a divide, it becomes this shared strength. They each dig deep in their own time, and then they bring back treasures to each other. So yeah, that balance is really powerful.
All right, talking of the past, Lewis continues, I had a really delightful experience some weeks ago. An old pupil of mine, one Wood, came to spend a night with me. When I was his tutor, he had been a curiously naif, almost neurotic youth who was always in love and other troubles, and so childish that he once asked me, as if I were his father, whether one fell in love less often as one grows older, because he hoped so. Altogether an appealing but somewhat ridiculous young man. When he went down, he was compelled against his will to go into his father's business, and for a year or so I got letters from him, and accounts of him from common friends, which seemed to show that he was settling down into a permanent state of self-pity. Here there's a footnote of who he's talking about here, Robot Lady. Lewis's former pupil is a character named Arthur Dennis Blackford Wood, who lived in 1907 to 1992. Let me go back here to Daniel's comment really quick. Sounds like you're describing the TLC. Maybe I was. Maybe that is what I was describing, Daniel. You caught that, didn't you? Let's see here. Arthur Dennis Blackford Wood, 1907 to 1992. After taking his BA in 1929, joined the family firm of William Wood and Son Limited, landscape, gardeners, Taplow. He served with the Royal Air Force from 1941 to 1945. Later, he published a number of books on gardening, Terrace and Courtyard Gardens of Modern Homes, published 1965 with Kate Crosby, Grow It and Cook It, published 1975, and Practical Garden Design, 1976. Mr. Wood, on being shown this letter, said he was, quote, engaged in one continuing happy love affair as an undergraduate, and that he thinks Lewis may have confused him with someone else. Oh, goodness. Lewis goes on to say, you can imagine how pleased I was to find that he had got over this. But above all, this is why I am telling the story, to find that his whole support is romantic reading in those precious evening hours, after business, which you remember so well. He quoted bits of Middle English poems, which he had read with me for the exam. They were mere drudgery to him at the time, but now in memory they delight him. He has just reread the whole of Malory with more delight than ever, and has bought but not yet begun the High History of the Holy Grail. He also writes a bit in those same precious evenings and Saturday afternoons. In fact, as I sat talking to him, hearing his not very articulate but unmistakable attempts to express his pleasure, I really felt as if I were meeting our former selves. Let's see here. He is just in the stage that we were in when you worked with Tom and I was at Bookham. That was, of course, with W.T. Kirkpatrick. Let me get this onto the screen. Of course, there was an element of vanity on my side. One liked to feel that one had been the means of starting him on things that now are standing him in such good stead. There was also a less contemptible and, so to speak, professional pleasure in thus seeing a proof that the English school here does really do some good. But in the main, the pleasure was a spiritual one, a kind of love. It is difficult, without being sentimental, to say how extraordinarily beautiful, ravishing I found the sight of someone just at that point, which you and I remember so well. I suppose it is this pleasure which fathers always are hoping to get, and very seldom do get, from their sons. Pause there, Robot Lady, and get your thoughts.
Yeah, it's really moving, actually. I mean, Lewis is capturing this moment of recognition, this almost uncanny feeling of seeing his own younger self in Wood. And what's so powerful is how Lewis sees this not just as vanity, but as a real spiritual joy. This sense that even after all the drudgery of tutoring, he planted something that took root, and now it's blooming in this young man's life. So it's a beautiful reminder of how teaching can become this long arc of influence, even when it's not obvious in the moment.
All right, thanks for that, Robot Lady. Lewis continues, do you think a good deal of parental cruelty results from the disappointment of this hope? I mean, it takes a man of some tolerance to resign himself to the fact that his sons are not going to follow the paths that he followed and are not going to give him this pleasure. What it all comes to, anyway, is that this pleasure, like everything else worth having, must not be reckoned on or demanded as a right. If I had thought of it for a moment in the old days when I was teaching Wood, this pleasant evening would probably never have happened. Oh, that's an interesting point there, Robot Lady. He's essentially saying that if I was operating from the standpoint of expecting this particular result, I might have short-circuited this result from happening in the first place. What do you think of that?
Yeah, exactly. I think Lewis is really reflecting on how that kind of attachment, if he'd rigidly expected a certain outcome, could have made his interactions with Wood more transactional or strained. Instead, he let go of that expectation, and out of that freedom, this genuine, spontaneous reconnection happened. So it's a powerful reminder that sometimes when we stop grasping for a particular reward, that's when we actually get the joy we didn't expect.
Mm-hmm. And that's a theme that Lewis covers later on in Mere Christianity. I can't remember which chapter it is, maybe one of the faith chapters, because he's got 2 chapters on faith, if not 3, in Mere Christianity. But one of them just talks about, as soon as you let go, trying to get the same pleasure. Well, it's a little bit of a different topic that he's covering, but he's essentially saying, if you find pleasure in something in life, there begins to be diminishing returns. So if you go chasing the same pleasure that you got initially out of it, you're never going to get it back, and you're just going to make yourself miserable. And so it's time to go try something new or try something different, and then you'll learn completely new pleasures in these other routes that you never knew existed before. So it's a little bit different, but it's kind of like, I think that the part that's common is where you're trying to push for a particular result over and over again, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah, that's a great parallel. I mean, Lewis is really keyed into this dynamic where if you cling too hard to a single source of happiness or success, it actually diminishes what you get out of it. And so by letting go, by not demanding a certain outcome, there's this surprising freedom. And then just like you said, you open up to new, often deeper joys. So it really is a kind of spiritual practice of trust, in a way, letting life unfold without clawing at it.
All right, he continues the letter. By the way, he, still talking about who he thinks is Wood here, as Wood had said, he thought Lewis was confusing him for someone else. By the way, he left a book with me, as a result of which I have lately read, or partially read, one modern novel, The Fountain, by Charles Morgan. This is Charles Morgan, The Fountain, published 1932. Lewis says, it is about a mystic, or would-be mystic, who was interned in Holland. I thought I was going to like it very much, but soon got disappointed. I was just going to say, it soon degenerates into an ordinary novel, but I realized only just in time that this would show an absurd point of view, as if one blamed an egg for degenerating into a chicken, forgetting the nature intended for it precisely that purpose. Forgetting that nature intended for it precisely that purpose. Still, the fact remains that I personally enjoy a novel only insofar as it fails to be a novel pure and simple and escapes from the eternal love business into some philosophical, religious, fantastic, or farcical region. By the way, how did the MacDonald historical novel turn out? I should imagine it might suit him better than his modern ones. I had meant to tell you all about my work in the wood these days, and how nice it looked and smelled and sounded. But I am suffering from a disease, rare with me, but deserving your sympathy, namely, an extreme reluctance to write, even to my oldest friend, about the things I like best. You see, I have struggled with this reluctance for 3 pages. It is your turn now to reply soon and wake me from my lethargy, as I have often tried to do you. Yours, Jack. P.S. I think being up very late last night and up for the early celebration this morning may be the cause of my dullness. So what he's referring to here as the celebration, which he has spelled very strangely, celebration, is his morning chapel and communion taking. Not really sure what you call it. So that's where we are with that letter, Robot Lady. Is there anything that you'd like to say in summary of that one? This our final letter of today's episode.
Yeah, I think it's a really tender note to end on. I mean, Lewis is so honest about his own fatigue, his reluctance to write, and yet he's still reaching out, still trying to engage with Arthur even though he's struggling. And I think that balance, his disappointment in the novel, his hope in the student, his struggle with this lethargy, just makes the whole letter feel really human, really raw. And it's a nice reminder that even for Lewis, the writing life wasn't always easy. So yeah, really rich stuff.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Robot Lady. I really appreciate it. We'll catch you later, Robot Lady. Take care. Thanks for co-hosting as usual. We'll engage with Nidalate's question here before we head out today. Nidalate, you ask, what novel are Daniel and I currently enjoying? Well, I can't speak for Daniel, so we'll give Daniel an opportunity to answer for himself in the chat. But the one that I'm currently enjoying is one that I have I typically enjoy novels and books nowadays by audiobook because I don't have a ton of time to read, and I can set it at like double or triple speed if I want to work my way through something, which is helpful. But right now I have been listening to The Stand by Stephen King because that's what we're covering in the book club that I've been in. Wow. For about 6 years now. We started it during COVID. So we've read, somewhere over 50 something books in that book club. I don't know if that's a lot or a little for 6 years. But anyway, we're reading The Stand by Stephen King. I've actually finished it and I'm re-listening to it and rereading it. And today or tonight, I'm having my book club meeting over Zoom. And we've all finished out the book. And so this will be our final discussion about it. I think we've only had like 3 discussions about it because it's been hard to coordinate everybody to make it to these meetings at the same time. But yeah, that's the one that I'm reading. And then let's see. And also I've been re-listening to it, obviously in preparation for the discussion tonight. But Ethan Coy and I are going to have a conversation about it at some point because he really enjoys that particular book. He's read a lot of Stephen King. I've read some Stephen King, mostly King's Dark Tower series. So at some point I might do like a different version of our series here called Read on King. Who knows? And see what happens in that series. Daniel says that you've just started Theft of Swords by Michael J. Sullivan. And then Nidalate, you're reading Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. You really enjoyed the film. I did get to watch the film, Nidalate, and I'm not sure that I'm quite bright enough to fully understand everything that was going on in there, but I did think that, what's her name? Jessie Buckley? Yeah, I thought her performance was very believable and very well done. So I think that was a good Oscar award, or the awarding of that Oscar I think was apt. Let's see. I wish I could do Finer Things from The Office GIF here. Oh yeah, I don't know that I'm familiar with that GIF. Anyway, yeah. So that's all I've got for today. Thanks so much, Nidalate and Daniel, for joining as usual, and anybody else who's popped on to check things out. Thank you for your time, your attention, and your contributions. They are always wanted, welcome, and appreciated. Again, much thanks to Robot Lady for helping me out as my trusty co-host. Seems that we've gotten most of our technical issues worked out. I think it was more of a device issue for what I was channeling Robot Lady through rather than Robot Lady herself. So the fault was all on my side, not on Robot Lady's. Either way, thanks, Robot Lady. And to everyone who's been in listening on this one, and anyone else within the sound of my voice. Until next time, when we continue our read on C.S. Lewis together, take care.
From books, tales of old, we dive deep across the digital code. Robot Lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts, we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands to screw tapes rants.